Good morning and welcome to H3TV, where we talk about how do we navigate disruption and not let it define us. How do we soar above our circumstances with hope, health, and happiness? I'm Annie Meehan, keynote speaker, inspirational, motivational writer, teacher, trainer, coach, and consultant. So I use the spoken and written word to inspire people to live an extraordinary life. I use fruits, I use symbols, I use anything I can to encourage you to get over your circumstances and soar above those disruptions. I come to you every week since COVID hit, and I try to come into your office and into your home and bring somebody with me that can share their ideas of how they have overcome and soared above the disruption of their lives. So thank you for being here. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. We will answer all of them. If not during the show, we will answer them after the show in the comments. But today's guest is Lucy. Please help me welcome Lucy to the stage. Hey, Lucy.
Hey, Annie. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you live? Give us the good stuff.
Oh, okay. This is going to sound a little bit crazy, but if you'd asked me about 6 years ago, I would have said I'm a mom and a wife. Ask me today, and I'm going to tell you that I am a spiritual entity experiencing the human journey as a woman.
Mm,
And the difference between the two is what's happened to me over the last 6 years.
okay.
I am a wife. I am a mom. I have, together with my husband of 30 years, we have two adult sons. And I hit a really, really challenging point 6 years ago. And that was as my oldest was getting ready to go away for college. And that's when I really started to question who I am. Because up until that point, I'd only ever considered myself as a wife and mother. I had invested everything I was into those two labels. And when I saw those changing, I basically went through an identity crisis. And that all spiraled out into a very bad rock bottom. I mean, it got to the point where I actually contemplated if I wanted to stay in this world anymore. And in that moment, I experienced what you hear a lot of people talk about, and that's surrender. And it was completely out of character for me. And I basically begged the universe, please just give me one thing to pull me out of my tailspin because I wanted to be here. I did want to be here. I wanted to live this life and I wanted to be here for my husband and my kids. And in those moments, I got quiet and I started to think about, well, if I don't want to be this person, then who do I want to be? And that's where I started to formulate this future vision of myself. And from there, I used it to sculpt a very unique and specific journaling practice that has completely transformed my life. It has brought so many new twists and turns to my journey, and it has brought me to where I'm sitting here today with you, Annie.
Sounds good. So it sounds like midlife was your disruption. You kind of jumped ahead to all these cool things. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But so it sounds like midlife was maybe your storm or your disruption where you had to re-identify yourself. And I don't normally show books, but I just got off an interview for a speaking engagement and the woman said, where did that book come from? And you made me think of it because this bruised book is when people hit that point that they decide, well, I feel bruised, I feel lost, and will I throw it all away? Or will I turn it into something sweet like a new identity or banana bread? So you just made me think of it because I know that I have listeners sometimes that feel exactly like you do, Lucy, that feel like they've lost themselves. And it's more than just a squeezed lemon. They feel bruised, they feel beaten down, and they're ready to throw in the towel. So when you think of this, I'm going to call it a disruption or a storm or challenge in your midlife. When you think of that, what was it because your son moved away? What made that moment, that season so significant that it really felt different than other disruptions that you had faced before?
I think it's because I really had to question who I was. I had made the transition from daughter to wife to mother
Mm,
relatively quickly.
mm.
I got married at 21, which, 30 years ago, that didn't seem very unusual. But by today's standards, I have a son that's 21. And I'm like, dude, you are no ready for this. Like, not ready at all. So I made all of those transitions and I never took the time to fully understand who I was.
Yeah.
We are also products of the 80s where women were told that they can have everything and be and do everything. And we were also given this invisible checklist, and I'm sure Annie, you can relate to this. These things that we're all told that if we complete, we will be happy. You get married, you go to college, you get married, you have a couple of kids, you have the house, you have the vacations, you have all of these things. And then often by the time we hit midlife, we have the time in our lives because our children are no longer requiring so much space from us
Yeah.
that we stop and go, hey, wait a second. I don't think I'm happy. And that's not to say, and that's not to diminish, what we have with our families and that. But what I'm talking about is that really deep and soulful purpose.
And maybe it's not even happy, maybe it's fulfilled, right? Like when you're talking about ladies from the 80s and do your checklist, what popped in my head, which is terrible, and I am not promoting this, but is the Virginia Slim cigarette commercials. And like if you smoke Virginia Slim menthol, I don't even know if they exist anymore, like you'll be tall and thin and sexy and everyone will want to be like you. And I'm like, that myth advertising, that myth mindset of you're going to be fulfilled if you just do your checklist, if you just buy this product, if you just do whatever. So when you kind of face that and that reality of like, wait a minute, I am more than a daughter, a wife, and a mother, but who am I? Who the heck am I? When do I get time to breathe, let alone to really ask myself away from my checklist, who am I? How did you kind of stay hopeful and looking forward through that hard, challenging season? How did you stay hopeful?
That came down to, and it's still somewhat shocking to realize that this all happened in such a short period of time. Most of this evolved in a matter of hours on this one particular day. So
Mm,
I created that future vision of myself, and I
yeah.
really sort of got into the heart of who was she? How did she think? How did she feel? And
Mm,
I wrote down 5 very simple statements about who she was. And then over a few weeks, then I started to expand that into an affirmation. So I
mm,
had these 5 affirmations.
mm,
And it wasn't long afterwards that I realized that these affirmations were sort of missing, that sort of that grit that really makes them resonate and stick with us. And then I remembered a TED talk by Simon Sinek, and he was talking about the power of why. And I thought, oh, well, why don't I just add in a why statement with my affirmations?
mm. Yeah.
And I had these 5 statements that were written, and I write those out every single morning. I have done that every morning for the last 6 years. My 5 statements. And these statements are what I call why affirmations
Mm,
because they're an affirmation that tie in your why. My days now, the way that I've been able to navigate and grow and learn through all of this is by starting my days by putting myself first and having a very strong journaling practice. You know, through journaling, that's how I've been able to, unpack and investigate and learn about who I am and what is it that I want to do. And, really connect with that other F word that you mentioned earlier, fulfillment.
fulfillment. So I think really what you're saying here, and I love this because I know we have listeners that need to hear it. Well, really what you said initially was to stay hopeful, I had to have vision, right? And then
Yeah.
you created a practice, getting to the why in the practice. So I think people think I'm disrespectful, which I never mean to be, but I ask an enormous amount of questions because I'm hugely curious and I don't always love rules, especially if they're rules for rules' sake. But if you tell me the why behind the rule, I'm like, I'm all in. That makes sense to me. But if you're just like, you have to, I'm like, but why? But what? I'm like a 2-year-old sometimes. So I love that you get people to ask themselves in their journaling. And a lot of people use the word affirmation cards. I've always called them belief cards. Keep reading them till you believe them so that you can live them out. But I love it becomes belief. But what did you call vision? What was your word you made up?
Why formations.
Why formations. So you get to the why, and then it actually forms your brain to believe, oh, this is the why formation. And then you can be an affirmation, a belief card. You can live out whatever, you know, I say do 5, but make every 6th one a funny one, because humor helps our mind absorb. So I would be like, my dogs are the most perfect dogs in the street and everyone loves them. That is not a true story, but it would make me laugh because I would think, to me, they're perfect. So I had that laughter. And so when you do 5 and then you add humor, it breaks up your brain to giggle, and then you can get back to a very intentional why formation. I love that. All right. So that's how you stayed hopeful. How about healthy, Lucy? And I think of health as, a lot of people think of weight. I owned 2 gyms for 12 years. Weight is a low part. It's more like financial, relational health, emotional health, mental health. How did you stay healthy in all the areas, not just, you know, when people think about that? What did you do to implement health?
Well, each of my Y formations touch on those different aspects of our life. So I have one of my Y formations is that I have a strong and healthy body, and I am living a long, fulfilling life,
Beautiful.
because that touch it's I agree with you. We are not these arbitrary numbers and labels that we apply to ourselves. That, yes, we need to be healthy, but health doesn't necessarily translate to weight, especially when you're talking about the midlife body. If you've experienced anything like I have on the roller coaster of hormones, it is what it is. You do your best. And as
Yeah.
long as you know you're making those healthy choices, and for me, every morning when I write that why formation, stating that I have a strong and healthy body, I
Mm,
do.
I
And
love
I
that.
think about those things that I did the day before that
Mm,
contributed to my healthy body. The green smoothie and the 60-minute beach walk, and the healthy choices I made out through the day. Sure, I had 3 or 4 glasses of red wine at the end of the day, but we're human and we're living our life.
you're
I
living your
st-
balanced life. Yeah.
I still focus on the things that I do. And really the only person that we should be comparing ourselves to is the person that we were the day before.
That's
And
right.
as long as that you can say each day, I'm getting up, I'm putting one foot in front of the other, and I'm doing the best I possibly can in this minute,
Yeah.
what else can we ask for?
Yeah, 100%. Do you write any Y formations about, you know, for me, so here's my 7. So physical's 1, and that I love the healthy body, and having that perspective of like, what did I do yesterday? I say to people, if you drank a glass of water, you're doing okay. So don't beat yourself up for what you didn't do. Celebrate what you did, whether it's a walk on the beach or a glass of water or a cup of coffee. But physical, emotional, mental, relational, career, spiritual, financial. Do you write a Y formation around any of those other 6 areas of your health?
Yeah, and one of them definitely is who I choose to show up as a person in the relationships that I have. I
Mm,
give the best of myself,
mm,
in all of my relationships,
love
and
that.
and I have an affirmation around that as well. I have another one about my spiritual connection. I
Yeah.
have one about the business that I'm building and everything that I am intending and desiring to manifest for myself. So I do cover those. I cover 5 areas, and for me, it was the 5 areas that at the beginning I found that I had gaps.
Mm,
What were those aspects in my life that I wasn't feeling that level of fulfillment, or that I wanted to be better on. So that's where my 5 statements came from. So yeah, I definitely touch on all of that, and they sort of intertwine in different ways in each of my wife formations.
excellent. My next question I'd like to know, because I believe this is the best medicine, or one of many. I think movement's my medicine, but a huge part of my medicine is laughter and humor. And so I want to know, how do you keep happy and humor and laughter in your life when on the hard days? Because even if you have strategies and systems, we all have hard days. So where do you look for it? How do you keep humor and happiness in your life?
Oh, that's been in a journey in itself, because I think it's quite easy for us to always get hung up on the negative. But I
Yeah.
think part of the transformation that I've been through in having that self assurance in who I am and what I want out of this life, I think that's really been a turning point. I'm not a serious person. I'm really not.
I can't even say that seriously.
No, I it's just not worth it. I spent too much of my time playing a role that wasn't me, and trying to fit a mold, and all of those things that we do. I'm 50. I don't want to live the next 50 years like that.
Yeah.
And ultimately it comes down to a choice. Yeah, sure. I run into my own muck like anybody else does. But you also have to have that inner resiliency to bounce back and to not let it get you down.
Yeah. 100%. I think I look for play. I mean, I mostly like people are like, you love to laugh. And I'm like, mostly I'm laughing at myself. Like, I think I'm such a dork. And people are like, are you a humorist? Can we hire you to? And I'm like, I don't know because I have a weird sense of humor. I think things are funny that other people are like, you're really weird. And I'm like, yeah, but to me, funny. Like, I'll post pictures with six chins on purpose and my eyes closed, not always on purpose. My daughter's like, your eyes are closed. I'm like, I can't see anymore. So what? I don't care. I think I look good. Like you got to just you got to just put yourself out there with your messy parts and love that. And so I love that about you, Lucy. I could tell that right away just chatting with you. You are a happy spirit, and whether you know that or not, that laughter, that smile is an energy that the world needs, and people need to laugh. So I love to look for YouTube videos or go to comedy shows or watch rom-coms for the 100th time because I know where I'm going to laugh, and I love to laugh. So Lucy, as you've gone through this disruption in your life, and I kind of know this about you, but I want our listeners to know, how are you using what you've learned on your own journey and your own struggle and the reality that whether it's for a few moments, a few hours, a days, weeks, or months, that darkness that can set in on a disruption and a disruptive mindset, how are you using what you've learned and what you've applied to yourself to help other people?
One, through my podcast. I have the roller coaster of midlife has over 300 episodes, which Annie, I believe you were the last episode that aired our conversation there. And that's really where, no holds bar. I will tell you. I will tell you what I've been through and the pain and the anguish because I remember how alone I felt. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought the men in the white jackets were going to appear at the door at any minute and take me away. I don't think we should feel that way. I don't want any other woman to feel that way. And that's why I share my story so wholeheartedly, is so that somebody else doesn't have to feel that way, whether it's one person, 100 people, or a million people. I
Yeah.
don't want someone else to feel that way. So my podcast is, my primary way right now. I did also last year I released a guided journal that's available on Amazon. It's called Your
Okay.
Journaling Journey, and that's to help people step into their own journaling journey, however that meets them. There's different tools and resources in there. There's some guided prompts and there's also blank pages. So that was the second way. The third way is that I started putting together exactly the steps that I took to create my Y formations. I call
Okay.
that 3 steps to go from a hot mess to a badass and start rocking midlife. It's a 3-part audio program that you can get from my website. It's a quick download there. I think the sound recordings are done on SoundCloud right now. So that's just another way that I was diving in deeper to start sharing Y formations because I've seen how they've transformed my life. And I truly believe that, I think if we all find that inner sense of purpose, find that fulfillment, there are so many problems that are going to go away. I mean, we're living, we talk about the pandemic that we just went through, but nobody's really talking about the pandemic that's been going on and only getting worse over the last 10 years, and that's our mental health. And I
Yeah.
really believe that the root cause of that is because we don't know what our purpose is anymore. So I believe that, if people start connecting with their own Y formations, then they'll be able to find their own sense of purpose and, navigate these stormy waters for themselves.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I teach a formula called the purpose formula to help people calculate their purpose, and mental health, such a passion of mine, right? And I think a life without purpose can feel like a life without meaning or without fulfillment for sure. And so what I like to help people do is discover, and I think you did this very well, Lucy, is that I believe that we all have pain in our life, right? So pain can be a messy desk, pain can be hormonal, pain can be a diagnosis, a death, getting fired, our company filing bankruptcy, whatever that pain is, it actually puts energy in our body. So pain creates energy, and it shows up as a stomach ache, as a headache, as isolation, as backache, like physical pain, but also emotional and mental angst, right? And so you have your pain, It shows up in your body as energy. I like to think of that energy as passion, which people don't always love. They're like, yeah, but what if it's negative? I'm like, passion can be negative or positive. It's fuel. Passion is fuel with what came with your pain. So I think of pain plus passion, which is your fuel, equals, and the equal sign is this, Lucy, and this is what's important about what you're doing is that the equals is about choice. Are you going to take what pained you, like literally happened, then becomes energy, your passion, and are you going to do your? I'm going to be bitter. It's not fair. Why should I go through these hormones? I hate men. I hate my life. I hate this, and sit in that. So your equals is your choice. Will you become better or bitter because of the pain you experienced? And when the equals becomes, I will become better because, and you said this, I think it's so important. It's part of a huge driving force behind me. I never want anyone to feel like I felt invisible, unloved, alone, in darkness, no hope, no whatever. But when you go to the equals and you choose better, you decide, I will use my pain and my passion for purpose to fuel and impact other people so they don't have to go through it. And the other thing it does, because depression and anxiety are mental health, are clinical and situational, both can be either and both, but they are always and often self-focused. I'm going through this, I'm going through this. So when we get to the equal sign and we choose the better, Lucy, you don't stop thinking about yourself, but you minimize the thought about yourself and you think, oh my gosh, every year a gazillion women are turning 50. A gazillion women's kids are going off to college. A million women are thinking about who am I beyond a wife and a mother? So you used your pain and your passion to equal your purpose to serve other people through your podcast, through your journaling, through all of this. And I think that is a life fulfilled. When we get beyond ourselves, beyond our circumstance and say, I'm going to use it to help others. And that is honestly where I think we soar above. I think what you're doing, Lucy, is saying, I'm not allowing the midlife hormones and depression and doubt to define me. I am deciding to use all of that. So no woman has to feel like this, and they're going to soar, and I'm going to give them tools through my podcast and my writing. So kudos to you for doing that, because that's what I'm always looking for in people is, are you using the hard stuff to sit in your sadness, or are you using it to help another person? Because gratitude is good, but generosity of spirit and of work to help others, well, that's a great life. And that is a fulfilled life. So I love, love, love what you're doing. So if there's a listener out there, and whether she's 35 or 65 and she's perimenopausal or menopausal or postmenopausal, and she's like, but Lucy, you don't know. You don't know how hard it is for me. I'm single. I don't have a husband. Lucky you. I don't have, kids that I don't, because we all have our stories, right? But what would you say to this woman who she feels so alone? She feels so overwhelmed. And she's saying, yeah, but mine's more than a roller coaster. It's mostly a pit. What could you say or encourage that woman? Because she's out there. I know she's out there.
Oh,
How can
yeah.
you encourage her?
That would have been me 7 years ago. I would have said that to myself. I'm like, you got no clue, girl. And the first thing that comes to mind, it comes down to self-love, is that we often forget that we have to love ourselves first. If I was to ask somebody, who are your 5 closest friends? My next question is going to be, were you on that list? And I think that whole concept of self-love, self-care, and self-acceptance, it's not taught to us.
Yeah.
And we often have to come across it from the pain. But a lot of the times when we find ourselves in these painful situations, it's because we're not self-loving. We haven't been practicing self-care. We have a lack of self-worth. So what would I say to that woman is, first of all, I'm here. And, let's tackle this. Let's turn inwards and see what we can bring up and shine for you.
Yeah, it gets better, right? And there is tools out there, and it gets better. And who you are today, like you're saying, 7 years ago, that would have been you, but it's not you, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be her, whoever's listening, or guy. I believe women go through menopause, men go through menopause. They got their own things going.
Absolutely.
Through, right?
I mean, as I mentioned, we have 2 adult sons, 21 and 24. And mental health for men is a very common topic because men are not allowed to show their emotions. They've, especially we're talking of, my husband, again, product of the 80s. Those guys were raised, they had to be tough. They had to be strong. They always had to provide. They had to be the answer to everything. And their mental health was often at the bottom of the list as well. So absolutely anybody can find meaning in their own why formations. Anybody can find their purpose, and anybody can, find the light at the bottom of whatever dark pit they're sitting at. I've been on both sides. You mentioned, we have a choice. I have sat for years in that pool of depression and, being everything that I'm not today. So I've seen both sides, and I'm just going to say right now, this one's a better one. Make the choice.
And it's work to get there too. I'm not saying it's an easy choice. Like I always say, I'm a person in recovery, 20 years of depression, the first 20 years of my life. And today I live this very hopeful, but I've had to implement an enormous amount of strategies. And if people make fun of me, I don't care. I don't go to violent movies. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to negative people. I don't hang out with negative people. I try to say I remove the Eeyores, or I very minimalize the Eeyores in my life. I have to have tickers. I have to go for a walk every day, not because I feel like it. I have to drink water every day. I have to get so much sleep. I think when you implement these things, Lucy, the other side is better. And I did lose my brother at 22 to suicide. And I think he truly had convinced himself the world would be better without him because he couldn't be strong anymore. And I do think it wasn't that he wanted to die. He just didn't know how to live. And that is why I do my work, is because mental health matters for men, women, and all people. And whether we are directly affected by it or love someone, is knowing how to be there compassionately is so important. So thank you for sharing all of that. So good. So Lucy, I know people are going to want to get to know you more, hear more about how you start your day, how you spend your strategies, how you moved from where you were to where you are. And so what is the best way to connect with you, follow you? What's the best way to do that?
The easiest thing to do would be to go to my website, therollercoasterpodcast.com. From there, you can get the 3 steps that I shared earlier. That's under the Start Here tab. You can also connect with me on social media. Or if you want to reach out and connect with me personally, you can always send me an email.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Lucy. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your hope, and your encouragement to our listeners. Thank you to our listeners for being here. We will be back next week with H3TV, where we spread hope, health, and happiness so that you can soar above your circumstances.